please can I welcome everyone to this meeting of Cabinet on Wednesday the 10th of September 2025 from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 9:30 a.m. My name is Councillor Martin Todd, Chairperson of the Cabinet and Leader of the Council. This meeting is live streamed from the Council's YouTube channel, and the recording will also be available after the meeting. Subtitles can be switched on and advice on how to turn these on is set out online. Can everyone ensure mobile phones are on silent, and can I remind members to use their microphones? In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Can I invite the members of the public to the meeting this morning? We will invite you forward when it is time to make your contribution. Turning to the agenda, first item is apologies for absence. I have no apologies for absence. The second is changing membership of Cabinet committees. There's none required. The third is disclosures of interest. I need to declare that I have a disclosable pecuniary interest in respect of items on the agenda due to my additional role as a Hampshire County Councillor. However, as there is no material conflict of interest regarding these items, I have a dispensation granted by the Audit and Governance Committee that enables me to speak and vote on these matters. In addition, in respect of agenda item 9, community infrastructure levy funding allocations, even though in this instance there is a material conflict of interest, the same dispensation applies. Councillor Porter, would you like to make the same declaration?
Yes, please. I would like to make the same declaration. I have a dispensation too from the Audit and Governance Committee that enables me to speak and vote on matters in item 9. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other declarations of interest? The next item is requests from councillors to speak. Councillor Lee wants to speak on items 8, 9 and 12. Councillor Horrell on 9, 11 and 12. And Councillor Godfrey on 10 and 15, which is the exempt paper. Next item, is that correct? Have I understood correctly? Good, thank you. The next item is public participation, and Mr. Tate wants to say a few words. Please come forward. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address Cabinet. You will recall that at Cabinet in January, I questioned what was happening with 158 and 159 the High Street, which are the two derelict and boarded up shop units opposite the Guildhall. These properties have been owned by the council since 2018, and Land Registry suggests that the council paid 3.75 million for them, together with 160, and I think probably a couple of other buildings the other side of the bus station. Although they didn't form part of the Silver Hill development, their future use was closely linked to the now derailed Silver Hill scheme, but apparently are not required by the council's new development partner. In January, the leader explained that the council couldn't justify spending the money on refurbishing the buildings, so was going to try and sell them. And in fact, a Goadsby sale board went up a couple of days after I spoke. I now learn that after 7 months, and having only received deliverable offers in the region of £100,000 to £150,000, the council has pulled the sale. Why? This administration has taken over 6 years to do virtually nothing here other than to put some posters in the windows. What has changed? I note that over the last week, workers have been in the building, but with what purpose? Back in January, I was told the final decision to sell or retain the properties would come back to Cabinet. But when and why? I have to seriously wonder what this administration is trying to achieve. The adjoining building, 160 the High Street, owned by the council, has Coral the bookmaker as its tenant on the ground floor, but the 2 upper floors are empty. And even more idiotic, there are no stairs to the upper floors. They are literally marooned. In my view, the upper floors of 160 High Street should be offering people housing, very touchy subject for me at the moment, in a very sustainable location. Having more housing in the city centre is an ambition of this council and accords with planning policies. And yet, why can't the council do something here? Gentian have achieved planning permission for 7 High Street, the old C&H fabric. I have repeatedly challenged the council over its purchase of the corner house, £500,000, January 2020. It is on the market now, 5.5 years later, asking price 500,000, potentially a loss of between £4 and £500,000. Making good decisions isn't easy, but making poor decisions or no decisions is costing Winchester residents an awful lot of very, very precious money. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed. There are a few points in there that need clarification. First of all, this figure of 3.75 million refers to all the properties owned by the previous developer for Silver Hill, not just the ones on the High Street. And it was very obvious why we needed to buy them out in order to secure the opportunity to redevelop central Winchester. So the buildings were originally bought to protect the entrance to the bus station area as part of the central Winchester regeneration. That's how we've ended up with the buildings on both sides of the bus station arch. And it's also why 160 is not for sale, because we need to maintain ownership of all those buildings in order to protect the future plans for central Winchester regeneration. Now, I will be the first to admit that 158, 159 was in an absolutely shocking state when we bought it. It's not safe to occupy. It will need major reconstruction, and because it's listed, is going to be extremely expensive to sort out. We originally thought we could sell 158, 159 separately, but for the reasons that became clear during the process, for the reasons that you identify, that 158, 159, and in particular the area behind it, which is a small courtyard, will necessarily form part of regaining access to 160, because there are now no stairs on the ground floor of 160 that would enable access to those upper floors. And like you, I am keen to see them brought back into use. So we need the courtyard at the back of 158, 159 in order to be able to bring 160 into use. And so we can't, and it wouldn't be prudent to sell 158, 159 separately from 160. And we can't sell 160 because we need it to protect the entry to central Winchester regeneration. The second factor is that if you look at the back of the site, it looks onto the back of Woolstaplers Hall. So as we look to the future of central Winchester regeneration, it has become increasingly clear that that back area needs to be designed, and the final scheme that is put in place to bring those buildings back into use needs to be designed to work with future plans for Woolstaplers and central Winchester regeneration. So I'm not happy. I thought we had a way of moving forward on this. We were unable to, we didn't come to a deal. None of the, for the reasons you highlight, none of the offers were such that it was good enough to be accepted. And we were concerned that we didn't lose control of the situation, because what we don't want is a situation, for example, as happens with the old Buffalo's building, where we sell to somebody who gets trapped in planning hell, essentially, and is unable to sort the building out. And we also need it to be done in a way that is consistent with the future of central Winchester regeneration and needs to be done alongside sorting out 160. So it has turned out to be a harder problem than we thought. It is absolutely our intention to sort that out. We have done plans in the past, which, you know, we've heard an awful lot about the importance of doing business cases before we purchase things and before we start projects. The plans that have been done in the past do not work financially. They are financial basket cases. They do not return the money that gets spent. And so under the under the processes that everybody is quite rightly asking that the council follows, we can't justify pushing the button until we've found a better solution. Bringing the upper floors of 160 back into use, in my personal opinion, and I need to get the full advice from officers on that, can form part of a better solution. Because it makes housing available, it provides an extra rental income, and hopefully that provides a platform for bringing the 158, 159 back into use. In the meantime, I was extremely unhappy that we were in a situation where we had broken panes of glass, broken windows on the front of 158, 159. And so what we agreed, even though it is very expensive to effectively rebuild the building is in such a poor state that it is fundamentally our understanding that it is not fixable in its current form. And effectively what we would need to do is rebuild a listed building from scratch. That is a very expensive and difficult project. So what we are doing in the meantime is repairing the front of the building so that it is not an obvious visual blot on the landscape. But we are not in a position at the moment, and we do not have a financially viable plan that enables us to reopen it as a new shop unit. However, what we are confident is that as we move forward with plans for Central Winchester regeneration, both the ability to have a better access at the back and the general impact on that area does provide a platform that will enable the buildings to be redeveloped. And we will continue to work to put in place a plan that will make sense financially for the council and for the long term of the High Street and for the long term of Central Winchester regeneration on the fastest pragmatic timing. But as people have repeatedly requested of us, we will only do so when we have a sustainable business case to make that investment, and we're confident we have a solution that works for the long term. Right. Item 6, the minutes of the previous meeting held on July the 15th, 2025. Cabinet, are you happy to agree those as an accurate record?
Agreed.
Next item, leader and cabinet announcements. Councillor Cremyson.
Thank you, Leader. I'm very pleased to announce that the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, otherwise known as DEFRA, has confirmed that the air quality measured in the Air Quality Management Area, AQMA, in Winchester has improved sufficiently that we no longer need to monitor it as an AQMA. The AQMA has been in place since 2003, and it's required that nitrogen dioxide levels are regularly monitored and recorded. For the last 3 years, since 2022, the area has met the required standards for levels of nitrogen dioxide. Another pollutant which is monitored is known as particulate matter, PM10s, and this has been under the required level for about 10 years since 2015. The City Council adopted a new air quality strategy in March earlier this year, which sets targets to go above and beyond the UK national air quality targets. This strategy outlines the need to work collaboratively across the district and the wider region to achieve cleaner air across the whole district by 2030. So importantly, whilst DEFRA has confirmed that there's no longer a need to have an AQMA in the city centre, the City Council is committed to cleaner air, not only in the city, but across the district too. So great that the progress is being recognised. It doesn't mean the job is done though. We're not stopping now, and we have an ambitious new air quality strategy to keep cutting pollution in the air even more. And it's another step on the journey to keep improving air quality in Winchester and across the district. The strategy, developed in partnership with the Air Quality Steering Group, which includes cross-party councillors, specialist council officers and representatives for public health, the business community and the local environment lobby, sets out a range of measures to identify the sources of pollution, such as road traffic, indoor air quality, domestic and business heating and burning, and construction and any new developments, and aims to identify the levers to try and reduce such pollution. And we will be providing an update on the air quality strategy at the Health and Environment Policy Committee meeting, which will be on Thursday the 18th, a week tomorrow. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other announcements? Councillor Becker.
Thank you. I'm sure many of you are aware it's been a really busy season for the council with community events over the break. We've had the very successful Access All Areas event at Stanmore, which attracted lots and lots of people and had lovely weather. And then last week I was really fortunate to be able to attend the Personal Bests event at the Leisure Centre, which is an inclusive event focused on participants who have learning difficulties, held at the Sport and Leisure Park. Luckily, we dodged the rain as much as possible. There was squash, there was boxing, all of these events run by local clubs who all offer inclusive sporting opportunities for people in the community. We had 193 participants on the day, drawn from Hampshire and beyond. And then coming up, we have a new event, the Winchester Aquabests, which will take place on the 30th of October, allowing adults with learning disabilities an opportunity for swimming and other water-based activities. So really, really pleased to see those. And we also would like to announce that the Winchester Sport and Leisure Park has been shortlisted in the Regional Public Club Centre of the Year South category, and will also be considered for Outstanding Club Centre of the Year at the UK Active Awards, which is coming up. So I'd like to pass on my congratulations once again to the staff at the Sports and Leisure Park for their nomination for these awards.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other announcements? Nope. In that case, we move on to item 8, which is the Nature Improvement Plan. And Councillor Lerney, would you like to introduce the paper?
Thank you, Leader. We live in one of the most nature depleted countries on earth. As detailed in the 2023 State of Nature report, evidence from the last 50 years shows that on land and in our rivers, changes in land management, particularly agricultural practices, and climate change have led to large declines in both biodiversity and the abundance of wildlife and plant species. This matters not just for the wildlife and plants affected, but for humanity. We now understand the benefits of access to nature on our mental well-being and quality of life, the benefits of healthy biodiverse fields for food production, the cooling effect of street trees and small parks in our urban areas, and how important nature is in absorbing carbon and combating climate change. This matters to our district, which is home to internationally important chalk streams, species-rich grasslands and deciduous woodlands, all of which are highly valued by our residents. The Nature Improvement Plan sets out how this council will work to first halt that decline and then reverse it to achieve nature recovery. It reflects our Nature Emergency Declaration and translates national and regional strategic goals into local actions and targets, and sets out how they will be delivered. The 2021 Environment Act made Hampshire County Council the responsible body for nature recovery across Hampshire, and this plan aligns with the draft local nature recovery strategy due to be approved by Hampshire's Cabinet at the end of this year, as well as the National Environmental Improvement Plan. With this plan, we commit to 5 pathways to slow the decline and start to reverse it, to protect and manage land for nature, create new spaces for nature, deliver more nature-based solutions for tackling climate change, prevent and control pollution better, and connect more people to nature. Like the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan, these pathways will help us manage and direct our resources to the areas which make most impact. And like the CNAP, responsibility for action on nature recovery goes beyond the Sustainability and Natural Environment team and is a whole council responsibility. Appendix C details the targets we were aiming for in 2030, the actions we plan to take in the next year towards achieving them, and what form delivery will take. These actions build on the achievements of the 2021 Biodiversity Action Plan, which have included a new meadow at Kingsworthy, swift and backed boxes, the new tree strategy, and work with community volunteers to manage areas of our land for nature. The Nature Improvement Plan itself is a technical report, and subject to approval today, it will be translated into a public-facing document, which will set out in a more transparent way our priorities and how they will be delivered. To aid our decision today, I'd like to invite the report author, Zoe Goldsmith, to go through the pathways and what the impact will be for our residents. So over to you, Zoe.
Great, thank you, Councillor Lerny. So, as we've just said, the Nature Improvement Plan is a technical document setting out the council's strategic approach to nature improvement, both on council land and across the entire district. I've just got a few slides here to help visualise the key delivery mechanisms of our Nature Improvement Plan, as we've detailed in the paper. Firstly, I just wanted to quickly highlight, as Councillor Lerny has said, that biodiversity is continuing to decline at an alarming rate, and that halting and reversing this decline was the starting point of our Nature Improvement Plan, and obviously is to address the fact that we declared a nature emergency in 2023. So we hope that the Nature Improvement Plan will sort of close this gap and promote and achieve nature improvement across the district. As I said, I'm just going to run quickly through our 5 new pathways which enable us to deliver that kind of overarching aim. So, I think a slight delay there. The first pathway, as Councillor Lerny said, is to protect and manage land for nature. So we've just detailed there what's covered in section 11.10 of the report. So for this pathway, we've got our measures for council land and district land just shown in that table. And as you can see, the main sort of deliverables of this pathway is to protect and monitor our most important sites in the district. So our internationally, nationally and locally recognised and designated sites, as well as other land which is important for biodiversity, so particularly open spaces, parks and things like that. This is the first time we've sort of collated all of this data in one place, so it is very technical by nature, but as you can see, there's some really good baseline information there, and actually we're already achieving high standards, so just maintaining that minimum is an ambitious target in itself. Our second pathway is to create new spaces for nature, so this includes continuing our programme of putting up swift boxes, creating wildflower areas, but as we look to the future, planting Miyawaki forests is one of the actions coming out of this plan, and also helping the delivery of biodiversity net gain and creation of new blue and green open spaces through our sort of local plan. And just to put some of those figures into perspective, 10 hectares is more than sort of 12 football pitches, so really significant areas for biodiversity. Our third pathway is to deliver more nature-based solutions, so focusing on where we can sequester more carbon on council-owned land, and also maintaining our high percentage of woodland cover that we have across the district. So 22.991%, that's significantly higher than the national target of 16%. So again, a really high baseline that we want to maintain. Our fourth pathway is prevent and control pollution better. So this is continuing the work that we're doing to reduce pollution in our rivers and estuaries. We've already upgraded 2 of our wastewater treatment works, but as part of this plan, we're committed to upgrading 10 of those by 2030. And we're also committed to delivering a river management plan for council-owned land through this pathway. Our final pathway is connect more people to nature. So this includes things like supporting community groups, volunteer opportunities, delivering projects and events both ourselves and with the collaboration of partners, providing grants for nature conservation, and working with a host of other stakeholders, so farmers, land managers and businesses. So I hope that just gives a quick overview of our 5 key pathways. You'll see in the report in section 11.12, we've also got a set of guiding principles. So these have been established where we can't necessarily set numerical targets, but they're still an important part of our plan and something that we want to embed across all council functions. So I just wanted to end this introduction by bringing us back to the recommendations in the report. Firstly, we asked for Cabinet to adopt our District Nature Improvement Plan, the technical document included in Appendix A, and we also asked for delegated authority to create and publish a succinct resident and partner facing executive summary document, which will be more accessible and will focus on the sort of key areas as I've highlighted today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Lee, would you like to come forward and make your comment?
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, Cabinet. I welcome adoption of this Nature Improvement Plan. Before making some observations and comments, I'd like to just go back in time a little. The Carbon Neutrality Action Plan in December 2019 was adopted some 201 days after the Climate Emergency Declaration. The Nature Emergency Declaration was in September 2023, and we are now some 721 days on from that declaration. If I recall correctly, the purpose of emergency declaration is to direct policy, budgets, staff, priorities, set measurable targets and KPIs, and mandate regular scrutiny and public progress updates. It is therefore puzzling and disappointing that it's taken 2 years almost for this much needed nature improvement plan to become before Cabinet for adoption. The Carbon Neutrality Action Plan, by comparison, was turbocharged. Many residents have battled, and our natural environment, if it had a voice, would be too. The climate and nature interdependence is clear, and the state of nature, as Councillor Loney has outlined, is deteriorating. There is no single published figure for nature loss during the last 721 days period, but I estimate some 80 hectares of greenfield nature has been converted to other uses. That's 96 football pitches, creating losses and pressures that might have been mitigated if we had the Nature Improvement Plan earlier. Unfortunately, the mandatory 10% biodiversity net gain only became mandatory in February and April 2024. And as habitat restoration benefit takes time to materialise, this offered little respite. Time is of the essence. Delay harms nature and harms all of us. And notwithstanding our biodiversity action plan, which is good, but it is inadequate in helping. So please, can we embed the Nature Improvement Plan principles across all council functions immediately, particularly where numerical targets cannot be applied? And can I ask Cabinet how this will be done and by when, especially for Sustainable Procurement Guide, employers' requirements for future contracts? I am concerned about some of our contractors' behaviour. Their respect for nature is poor, and by association, we are tainted. It harms us and all of us. I suggest we need a clear implementation program. I don't see that. Perhaps we need a nature literacy program akin to the carbon literacy program for all staff and members. We need to walk and talk and make up for the 720 days of missed opportunity. We must not let this nature improvement plan and its pathways, which are good for action, to sit on the shelf. Please, can we look at the implementation program by service area for Cabinet, ELB and the HEP committee oversight. Furthermore, we cannot deliver nature improvement alone, as has been outlined. And so can I ask, what is the ramped up partner activity that Cabinet is expecting, and particularly maybe with South Downs National Park? Do we need a new focus working group beyond the local nature recovery strategy group? How does Cabinet envisage the bottom up alongside top down approach working without extra resource. Local engagement is vital. In terms of communications, I note the intentions, but given the challenges of delivering nature improvement along all our other competing priorities, so can I ask, please, can we ensure that the media launch is framed appropriately for habitat and species protection and restoration, perhaps through an ecosystem services lens? This is what the public understands: clean water, flood, drought protection, pollination, food production, air quality, recreation, well-being, carbon storage, etc., etc. Highlighting these benefits will boost understanding, engagement, and the respect nature deserves. After all, it's the life support system we all depend upon. And finally, can I just thank Councillor Lernie and the officers for bringing this plan together and for their patience with my suggested amendments, and for the HEP committee's colleagues' useful scrutiny, which I think was done well. Please, can we change Winchester's culture by delivering this plan as quickly as possible and embedding it in all our thoughts and ideas, and particularly to influence the unitary authorities under the next local government reorganisation, where we need exemplary action. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Lernie.
Thank you. As I said in my introduction, the nature emergency is something which applies across all our council functions, and is not just a responsibility of the SANE team. I think it's also important to say that just because we don't have it written down doesn't mean there isn't action happening. The Nature Improvement Plan is a successor to our Biodiversity Action Plan. So we were implementing actions within that, and this does carry on from that. We have also been required to align with the local nature recovery strategy, which, as you will know, has been delayed somewhat. That still hasn't been agreed. However, we are now confident that the actions within the Nature Improvement Plan are aligned with that, as well as the national strategy. We have been doing key actions such as implementing biodiversity net gain in planning, which has increased the resource and the workload of the natural environment team significantly. So that is an area where extra resource has been put in. In terms of working with partners, actually just on Saturday, I was up at the Winchester Science Centre with their Wonder Seekers team, looking at some of the work that they've been doing with children from deprived areas, which was absolutely fascinating, and they were so thrilled. We were working out on 8.5 acres of land that they've been donated by Arqiva very generously, and they're very keen to work with us on improving that land for nature. It is chalk downland already, but I think there is a lot we can do, and particularly because they just need advice in terms of what they can best do. So that is an example of where we will be taking opportunities as they come up across the district. While the South Downs National Park is an important partner, it's not the only one, and I think we need to recognise that as is detailed in the report, we will be working with farmers and landowners across the district where that can be beneficial. I've done a lot of tree planting out on Hinton Ampner, which is with I think they've planted 3,000 trees. I think it might be more than that this year, and they have a couple more seasons of tree planting to go, so I'll be out there again. So there is a lot happening over the district, some of which will need our assistance, such as up at the Science Centre where we can help, other of which where we can be setting a good example, and things will happen. We just need to be clear that this is a district-wide plan and will involve an awful lot of people taking part.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Lernie. Cabinet, does anybody have questions for Councillor Lernie? I see Councillor Reach.
Thank you, Leader. Just a couple of questions. Here in St Michael Ward, obviously it's largely an urban area, and about a third of the ward is taken up by the South Downs National Park as well. But you've talked about access to nature being incredibly important, particularly to urban areas as well. From where I'm sat at this very moment, I can see St Giles Hill. Could I ask if we're working with partners and friends of St Giles Hill Park to look at the work they're doing up there to improve biodiversity and accessibility in the park? And secondly, Barend Meadows as well. A local resident has been very passionate and is working with CPRE to do some work to improve the land that was actually reclaimed when the motorway was built back in the early 90s. And are we working with CPRE as well, please?
Officers may want to expand on this, but yes, we are working with the St Giles Hill group, who've been, I think, while challenging at times, very helpful to us in terms of providing not only labour over and above what we could supply, but also in considering the future of the hill. We have supported the Magnificent Meadows project. I now have a scythe at home, in fact, so watch out, everybody. Yes, absolutely, we are supporting groups. We do have the ambition to make sure that everybody has nature relatively close to where they live and can access it, and that is particularly important in urban areas, particularly in poorer urban areas where people may not have the facility just to get in a car and go to a country park, and it needs to be on their doorstep. So Mr. Smith, would you like to add anything to that?
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. Only just with St Giles in particular, yeah, echo what you're saying. Working relationship with the group is great. Yeah, really pleased to be working with them. I think what we've set out in a sort of updated management plan are a set of management aims and targets, which are our sort of day-to-day, and then we move on to the really aspirational things as well, which aren't funded at the moment, but they are potential projects and so on that look a little bit further. But there's the sort of the day-to-day management of the park, the day-to-day ecological and nature improvements which we have put in place, areas of meadow and so on. A lot of the it's an amazing place in the middle of the city that's got that woodland, so it's focusing on the woodland management there. Ash dieback's a big factor in that, which unfortunately come back to budgets. That eats up a lot of our budget for that sort of work, but it also, we can try and work with dual purpose. The work we do there for safety management can also have nature improvements as well. So yeah, we're working with that group. It's going well.
Thank you. Councillor Porter.
Thank you. In my questions, when I looked at the paper, was about the blue infrastructure, but obviously we have a lot of people taking part in citizen science for this. So the Upper Itchen Restoration Group is an example of a group that's taking a lot of part of citizen science. How will you incorporate citizen science into the involvement? I mean, you've already talked about the Wonder Seekers project, but how will we be doing that?
Yeah, I think while the river management plan that we're proposing to create is very much around the river within our own ownership, I certainly see that we will be able to incorporate some aspects of that within the work we do around that river management, partly because it's helpful to know what's going on upstream when you're managing river downstream. Again, officers may wish to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you. If you don't mind me just adding to that, we already do quite a bit of work with the River Catchment Partnership. So we sit on 3 different ones: Teston Itchen, the River Meon and the East Hants Catchment Partnership. So they're a great opportunity to bring in citizen science, as well as kind of working with Wildlife Trust and other organisations to get a full sort of landscape scale picture of how our rivers are doing. So yeah, absolutely, where we can bring in that citizen science information is really vital and important.
Councillor Royston.
Yes, thank you. I wonder if we can, while we've got officers here in the room in a public forum, we can just ask for a little discussion around time scale for some of these areas to deliver, because there's some things which can be done where you go away, you do it, and it's done. And in this area, this feels like something where you start things off, and then it can take it naturally takes a long time before you achieve the objectives of biodiversity. So I wonder if you could just talk about that, and perhaps I can also use the opportunity to big up the Worthies Ward, which has 3 very fantastic, different diverse ways of doing biodiversity in the shape of Barton Meadows, which is on the edge of the city. We've got the very well-known Top Field area, which is a different type of environment, and we've also got the Loughton Fields area, which is adjacent to the HAB development, and they're each of them are different and distinctive, and they're evolving. I wonder if you could just talk around just how long it takes for these sites to kind of become really rich, as opposed to just delivered.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, I just quickly wanted to come back on that. I think it is a good opportunity to say that, because yeah, nature doesn't just happen overnight. The improvements that we're proposing, we set out in our 5-year plans. I think things like woodland, especially, we're not going to grow mature woodland overnight. But Zoe mentioned in her talk the Miyawaki forest. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I think I am. But these are basically a different take on tree planting, which goes a lot more scientific approach, a different approach from your standard dig a trench and stick it in. But the results that we're seeing, Natural England, DEFRA, all sorts are really, really encouraging. So we could create these areas in urban areas as well, smaller areas of woodland that will show biodiversity benefits for access, benefits for people to be able to realise really quickly. So yeah, I think it's the visibility of them which is really key, to be able to show that as well. So I think that's really important. And then just really, I guess, commenting on timescales again with things like biodiversity net gain, which Councillor Lernie mentioned, that's going to be key to our delivery of a lot of nature improvement. And that is linked to planning. So we have to go through that planning process. Once we discharge those conditions, that's when we get moving on the biodiversity net gain. So it is a long-term plan that we're looking for that, but we can use local nature recovery strategy to direct into the correct areas as well. I don't know, Sarah, have you got anything else on?
Yeah, just to add, yeah, that it can take decades for not just our woodlands but also our wildflower meadows to reach that really nice condition. So you mentioned obviously Top Field. We've got other sites like White Shoot Ridge, which are really good examples of sort of meadow habitat or species rich grassland. But to get those to sort of sync status or triple SI status, that takes tens, hundreds of years even. So yeah, this nature improvement and recovery is a long-term gain, and it has been quite difficult to set sort of measures or numerical measures that we can achieve in 5 years. So we've been quite careful about how we've gone about that. We want to make sure that they're achievable, but that we can monitor what we're doing and feed back to people on how we're achieving that. So there is definitely a balance, but I think what we've set out we can do in the next 5 years, and obviously it's a longer term picture than that. So beyond those 5 years, we want this work to continue so that we can fully see nature recovery.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Any debate on this paper? Councillor Porter.
I'd like to bring the accidental as well as the planned, because at a parish council meeting last night, a farmer was now sending his crop to the Three Maids Hill site. So now, instead of leaving his field fallow after the wheat crop, he plants green until that's collected and sent off to the AD plant. And he particularly mentioned last night that he has seen in that an increasing number of insects and other flowers growing. And he's very conscious of the change in the ecology in that field or those fields, even in this last 1 year. So it's been a quick win in that sense, that it's provided a habitat between seasons that previously wasn't there. I just think it's an interesting point that we are looking at ones where we're planning, but there are a lot of others. Councillor Cremoyson just mentioned 3 in a ward. I could think of another 3 that are accidental, really, and it's really interesting to make sure that we think of those as well and offer the opportunities for the public to take part and take an interest in places that they hadn't necessarily taken interest before. So I think it's really good to have this plan and to show that we are doing our part, but they can do their part too.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Any other debate? Any final thoughts, Councillor Lerney?
Thank you. I'd just like to re-emphasise that this is not something that we're going to be doing on our own. It will require us working with a lot of partners, and a lot of it, as Councillor Porter says, will be not quite accidental, but by disseminating different ways of doing things and hopefully encouraging landowners and residents to give it a go, then we'll be able to see a measurable difference. I'm really pleased with the support that has been received for this plan, and we look forward to implementing it.
Thank you very much indeed, and a huge thank you to officers for putting in place with Councillor Lerney such a thorough, properly thought through plan that builds on the absolute commitment that we've had to biodiversity since we took control, since we put in place that initial biodiversity action plan, and supported the work that flowed out of that. You know, it has been absolutely built in as a priority for this council since the day we took control. It's been something that I know the former leader and myself have supported, and that's something that we have baked in across the organisation even more deeply since the motion was passed calling for a nature emergency. Since we built it into the council plan, both of those ensuring that it's an unambiguous priority right across the organisation. And I'm really pleased to see the extra depth to that commitment that this plan brings forward. So we have 2 recommendations in front of us. The first is that we adopt the Winchester District Nature Improvement Plan technical document, and second, that we delegate authority to the Corporate Head of Economy and Community to create and publish a resident and partner facing executive summary, and I'm assuming that will be done in consultation with the relevant cabinet member as well. So cabinet, those are the 2 recommendations. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. We now move on to item 9, which is community infrastructure levy funding allocations. Councillor Porter, would you like to introduce that paper?
Thank you very much. And I note there's something on the scrutiny committee draft minutes, so I will talk to that at the end of my presentation. Since 2014, Winchester City Council has collected just under £26 million worth of SIL community infrastructure levy. It's collected from developers and put into a fund for use by the council to mitigate the impact of development and to support the impact of development. If we approve the sums today, there'll be just over £3 million in that fund left. In 2018, 1.5 million was directed to Hampshire County Council for transport projects. However, more has been allocated to Hampshire County Council since for particular projects, and we particularly use it to support the movement strategy. If approved today, there'll be just £3.16 million remaining, with another round of applications in this quarter expected. The SIL fund is split into 3 areas: transport and active travel, district and strategic projects, health and community projects. And there is one application today which is being deferred because we're aware that there's a similar request made to the SDMP. So we're working with them and Hampshire County Council for the most effective solution to cross the road in Twyford. We also recover and return the SIL fund if money is unspent from other projects. So today's paper also acknowledges the £150,000 not spent on the King George V ground path. So the total to be agreed today is £549,333. So, of £549,333. Following these agreed grants, there'll be just, as I said, 3.167 million left in the SIL pot. And I just mentioned that because there's a question raised about how the spending of the 13.4 million infrastructure could be accelerated in the allocation of interest as item 6 on the scrutiny committee, and it isn't that sum. That's actually not correct. So I'd like to just go on to talk about the projects. Under the transport and active travel, there's one for 282,000 for the Mitchell Lever Railway Station path from the rail bridge to the station, pub, village hall and recreation ground. The details of it are on page 102 in the appendix, and the diagram of that is a little later in that same paper. A figure of £36,393 for the Friarsgate crossing to accommodate the needs of cyclists and pedestrians. This is part of the route between Andover Road, Kings Barton and Abbots Barton into Winchester. We're now adopting the name the Barton Line as suggested by Cycle Winchester for this route. The details for that are on page 101. And then under the district and strategic projects, an all-weather, all-access path around the River Park Recreation Ground, which, as many of you will know, gets a little soggy from time to time of year, for £153,000. And so those projects come to £549,393. Our SIL income, just for information, is usually between 1 million and 2 million, and so far this year we've collected over 200,000. So I'm going to ask the committee the cabinet to consider the recommendations and approve the recommendations as shown on the paper. Thank you. Our officers are obviously here to answer any other questions.
Thank you for coming along. Before we move into cabinet questions, I have 2 deputations on this, or 2 people registered to speak. Councillor Lee, would you like to come forward?
Thank you, Leader. I have some quick observations and questions. As Councillor Porter said, the updated July 2023 protocol still applies with the ring fence pots of 60%, which said City Council led, 30% transport active travel, 10% community health. And we have a SIL panel of 3 cabinet members plus 2 directors. So I have a question, is in light of the one district commitment, will cabinet consider adjusting the panel to reduce what I call the cabinet dominated urban focus composition of the panel? And given the pressures on the 60% Winchester City Council led part, how will we sequence strategic priorities for 26-27? Is it time to review the criteria of the 60-30-10 ratio and also to think about the impending local government reorganisation implications? In terms of funding, interest and transparency, up to 5% of the SIL funds is collected for implementation administration, which reduces the fund. Council Porter has already highlighted since 2014, 26 million is collected, but there are statutory deductions and a Hampshire payment, which has reduced the amount available to just over 19 million. That seems to be a big reduction. So I just wonder whether that could be explained a bit further. And the fund size, as picked up by scrutiny last night, suffers further when the SIL interest is currently going to the general fund. So I wonder, is the cabinet making a decision today to decide to ensure that interest does go back to the SIL fund rather than to the general fund for community benefit? There's mention of a Southern Internal Audit Partnership audit in April 2025, which stated that it was limited assurance on the SIL collection and accounting. Is there going to be a time-bound action tracker created? Is that complete? What's outstanding? And when is there going to be a retest of the assurance? I'm not sure I've seen that or aware of that. Project benefits and value for money and monitoring. Possibly there are some gaps in benefit quantification. So maybe Cabinet can expand on this. Modal shift, trips captured, collision reduction, carbon saved, accessibility uplift. Perhaps this not being transparent limits the value for money and wider benefits appreciation. I don't know if I'm correct, but that's my instinct. And are there still post-project audits to confirm spend and delivery of outcomes? I'm not clear on that. Perhaps a still audit action log is needed as part of quarterly performance reporting. Again, if it's in place, apologies, I'm unsighted. Policy and plan alignment, still assessments focusing on outcomes, accessibility, delivery risk, and alignment with our plans is there. And I hope obviously the nature improvement plan in its adoption today sees that firmly placed fair and square in terms of scoring and oversight. Obviously requiring all SIL schemes to now consider co-benefits, air quality we talked about this morning, shade, SUDs, biodiversity, positive planting, consistent with the wider strategies and plans is really important. And I hope that Cabinet can provide some reassurance that that's going to be done in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And Councillor Horrell.
Chair, good morning, and thank you for allowing me to address Cabinet this morning. You won't be surprised, as one of the representatives of Wonston and Micheldever Ward, I want to address one of the projects on the list this morning, which is the proposal to fund the new pathway at Micheldever Station, which we find most welcome. I think it's been on the boards for about 15 years. Councillors who have been here longer than me will remember that. And there was a S106 contribution taken for the pavement long ago. After this small settlement has nearly doubled in size, the pavement is now much needed to allow greater safety for pedestrians moving around and through the village of Micheldever Station. The land for the pavement is being offered by an owner without payment on the understanding that the project will deliver several things. That is new soundproof fencing, 2 vehicle access onto her land, including drop curbs, reinforcement at the south end of the new boundary where land falls away quite steeply, and access to the water meter on the new pavement at the northern end of that route. They may seem details, but are important clarifications given the nature of this scheme. And I see Councillor Porter nodding. She knows well that we've all been working collectively to bring this to fruition. I'd be grateful for the confirmation that these will be delivered as part of the scheme. It's not entirely clear from the appendix to this paper that all of those details are absolutely clarified. And given the landowner is donating the land free, I think it will be important to ensure the fulfilment of this project, that those elements are reviewed. Chair, I'd also, on another matter, 2.8 in the paper, already raised by the previous speaker, the audit undertaken and the limited assurance given to the SIL collection and accounting. I think for all of us, this is a very significant budget, most important on some very key areas for development in the district. And it would be helpful for us all as members to be able to understand what those most pressing issues were and how they were completed and what further actions will be taken to bring this area up to a satisfactory level. I'd be grateful for that clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Porter, any response to those comments?
Yeah, thank you. One is about a district-wide focus rather than urban focus. In fact, at the beginning of our tenure of the council, there was a limited amount of money allocated for the rest of the district. We used to hand it out we used to allocate like 200,000 or 300,000 over 2 or 3 years, but realised that actually our parishes are very good at spending the SIL they receive. They're very prompt in using it, and so that number has now changed slightly. So we're now, as part of this district and strategic projects, so that's an ongoing budget that we're not having to agree year on year. So that's a very positive move that we've made. We made it a couple of years ago, or over a year ago, in order to support that. We actually have an online service for an application process now for the whole district, and the conversations take place with any member of any parish council or community group that's seeking money. So I don't believe that we've created a completely opposite of what you were trying to explain. I think it's we really are opening it to the whole district, and it has been for some time. The second point was about interest, and I'm going to leave that to Councillor Cutler, but I do believe that actually by having that interest in general fund, we are reducing the borrowing costs of the council as a whole. And so I think it's an interesting challenge, but I think we can justify it. In the scrutiny points that were raised, the other one was about the money left and the allocation of interest, and so I know that we said we would address that and come back to scrutiny in full detail at the next time. Mrs. Keys might like to make a comment if she wishes to. Councillor Horrell, yes, absolutely. The reason we have given this very large amount of money for the Mitchell Devastation Path is because it's an important piece of infrastructure for the residents that live there, and although they haven't had development in the last few years, it certainly justifies it against I think the original plan was done in 2012. But you mentioned about a particular resident. It's an opportunity that may never come back again, but we do want to make sure that the licence she receives has the appropriate detail in it. If you recall, when the work was done on the Andover Road further round from the station, individual licences were given to each individual household, and they took some time to organise. But we have set some time limits on this money so that the work can be done promptly, and so that we're effectively giving them a 2-year time limit to complete the work, not just to start, and the 1 year to start the work, I think it is. And that licence agreement will be a private agreement between themselves and the county council doing the work. I do believe as well that within the points that Councillor I think I'm actually not sure, I've just got written down, I would answer, challenge it, is about the nature issue. I think it was you, wasn't it? Sorry. The nature issue. It is certainly something that is incorporated into every single piece of work that we do. And it's part of the street scene that we're discussing in every situation. So I don't believe we're ignoring it at all. It's part of the work we do. I think, would you like to just talk briefly about the audit within what we can talk about in the public session? Thank you.
Ms. Keys, I would stress that we are going to talk about interest and other such things under budget Absolutely. Paper, under the outturn paper with performance monitoring. Sorry, performance monitoring paper. Wherever it is on the agenda, that's where we're going to talk about it. Right, okay. So is there here, because this is about the spending decision, but Ms. Keys.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up the point on the internal audit, on our routine internal audit plan, we did a piece of work on developer contributions that came back with a limited assurance opinion, which and that is reported through our audit and governance committee. So that is completely picked up within our standard audit work. There is a management action plan to address some of the weaknesses that were found in that area. And completion of those is again monitored by our audit and governance committee. So there is an action plan which is underway.
Good.
Thank you, Ms. Keys.
Thank you. Cabinet. Councillor Reach, do you have any questions? That was Councillor Reach, Councillor Lerny. Okay, Councillor Reach first.
One of the few good things the previous Prime Minister did in October of 23 was announce significant funding for Access for All to improve access to railway stations. we talked about here doing our part to improve access to Micheldever station, but the station remains inaccessible to people who are in wheelchairs or those who need additional support. Are we, I know the leader has met recently with the managing director of South Western Railway, are we impressing upon them the importance to apply for that access for all funding to make Micheldever truly accessible?
So the County Council did apply for the access to all funding, actually with the Parish Council for this project for £50,000. It was rejected because it actually still doesn't reach the station platforms. Partly this plan is so important because the opportunity to reach both was given, an estimate was given of many millions of pounds to create a bridge. However, because the number of people travelling from there is not so great, it is very clearly advertised that they will take someone to the nearest station by taxi. I have known people in that area actually being taken to London by taxi if it's better, because it's actually cheaper long term to take the few people by taxi to the hospital. They've gone to Great Ormond Street or whatever by taxi and brought back, rather than actually building a new station completely. Actually, I think it's a very good, sensible use of money. I think it's a sensible way of thinking about it. But this path allows residents to get all the way round the station in a way that they can reach all of the other facilities in the village with ease and safety in an all-access path.
Thank you. Councillor Lerney.
Thank you. The issue was raised about rural sill. However, a third of the district is covered by the South Downs National Park. Can you remind us of the arrangements for sill in that national park area?
Yes, so sill is collected by the National Park for use in the National Park, and we collect the sill in our own planning area. So it's done by planning area, not by district. And Twyford is like many other villages, as they're partly in and partly out of the district and partly in the South Downs National Park. So they collect, they apply to them as well. And the challenge for the Twyford application was that they quite rightly had made a similar application to the one they'd made to us, to them. And we have started, I think Mr. Lincoln might like to say something about this, but we have really now acknowledged that as a problem, and but also as an opportunity. And if you'd like to just talk through what you've been doing with them, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Yeah, just to clarify, Twyford is part in and part out of the National Park, but majority in. So all of the sill for Twyford is collected and goes to the National Park. What we tend to do with areas such as Twyford that are on the boundary or cross the boundary is we work collaboratively with the National Park on that. So we have on occasion funded projects that are where sill is collected by the National Park, at where the benefit applies within our planning area as well. So we take a sort of grown up and collaborative approach to working with them on that. But as the National Park collect the sill for the Twyford area, we didn't want to take any view on this application until we know the National Park's view on it.
Thank you very much indeed. Any further questions? Any debate? Councillor Lerney.
Thank you. Obviously, I do sit on the panel, so I am very familiar with these schemes, but I do welcome the fact that it does illustrate our commitment to active travel going forward. I am concerned, however, about counties' ability to actually implement schemes, even when they come forward, even when they bring these schemes forward to us. And I think we do recognise that we really do need to keep their nose to the grindstone on this and say, we've offered you the money, you now need to get on and implement it, particularly in a scenario where we only have a few years left probably to actually get these things done. So I think that is something that we are conscious of the need to make sure that these do actually happen. And I think that's something that we'll need to keep on going on about going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. Councillor Croyson.
Yeah, I really just wanted to make an observation that although these 3 projects are not actually in my ward, I am familiar with all 3 locations sufficiently to know that there's a need there. And all 3 of these projects, I think, are well worth supporting, particularly because of the active travel benefits, whether that's for people walking or cycling into the city or in the Mitchell-Dever station area, just moving around more safely. So just wanted to provide my support to these projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other debate? Councillor Porter, any final thoughts?
Just to reiterate that the money is only handed over. It's promised, but it's only handed over when they've spent it. And we are very clear that we are very clear holders of this money until it has been spent. So we are conscious of the closing date of the likely envelope time that we can, a window of time that we can spend this money. It's important that these applications have enough detail in them to give us a real idea of the cost of something, but enough flexibility to ensure that the final I's and T's are dotted and crossed in the final plan so that they're effective for people to use them. So going back to one of the questions, which was about the audit of this and the audit of the money, it's very carefully audited by, I can assure you, it's very carefully audited by the team, and the outcomes are very carefully audited by the team as well. But it's money, it's public money, which we are very keen to make sure is for the benefit of the public.
Thank you, Councillor Porter, and thank you to the work by officers and to the members of the panel to review these applications in detail and bring them forward. I think they're excellent proposals. I've heard the comments about so excellent proposals which I support, and I'm sure we will be voting through in a minute. There are some interesting points raised by scrutiny about the pace at which we spend SIL and interest in that on that committee and potentially looking at how it could be accelerated. I think that's an ongoing conversation, particularly that we need to have with the county. I know that actually work has gone on there recently to improve the tracking of Section 106 obligations, because they were getting to the point where they were losing some of them because they took so long to implement. And maybe there's a conversation to be had to ask whether our SIL allocation could be kind of looked at, not as a budget because they need to make the case for it, but as something that is tracked and looked at and considered when they're reviewing their progress on spending. We're beyond that point now, but a potential conversation to be had. Since it is an interest of scrutiny, and I don't believe they put in place a work project, but we'll certainly share their interest in seeing how we could accelerate it. So we have a good set of recommendations in front of us. The transport and active travel, we have 2 projects, upgrading the crossing at Friars Gate and providing the much needed footpath in Andover Road, on Andover Road in Mitchell-Dever. We have a project to fund the perimeter footpath at Real Park Recreation Ground. Delighted to see that coming forward. We have a release of SIL for KGV, which is a good thing to show that we are looking at those allocations and reallocating them where needed. And then we have a couple of delegations in order to deliver the agreements that we're making today. So Cabinet, those are the agreements in front of us. Are you agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to officers for all your work getting these schemes ready and brought forward. Thank you to Councillor Porter for her work and colleagues in terms of having the paper and introducing it today. We now move on to item 10, the general fund outturn. Deputy Leader, would you like to introduce the paper?
Thank you, Leader. I'd like actually to start really with thanking the finance team for once again doing a superb job in producing the statement of accounts within the time frame and publishing them. This report, this outturn report, is really a more digestible version of the statement of accounts, giving us the broad figures on outturn. The report details the variances from budget across service areas and also the additional interest receivable. And it shows that we had a positive outturn of just over £2.4 million against budget, which has allowed the transfer of just over 1.7 million to reserves and 0.711 to the general fund reserved. As is usual, these transfers, along with additional funding in the year from grant sources, necessitates the revision of the capital programme to include these new budgets as well. The report also seeks the approval to write off 5 uncollectible non-domestic rates debts, and that the detail of which is in the exempt appendices or appendix. The report really shows our continued effective custodianship of the council finances. It was considered by scrutiny on Monday, and there were a number of points raised, including we mentioned the aspect of SIL. Scrutiny committee resolved that the report be noted that I consider the allocation of interest earned from community infrastructure levy funds to share that with the committee, and also that Councillor Porter consider a member discussion with the aim of encouraging applications, as we discussed in the last meeting. In terms of the SIL, in the interest from the SIL fund to the SIL fund, and given that our treasury management and our interest received is all bound up in our total reserves, it would be very complex to calculate the figure, and of course that interest is flexibly used within the general fund anyway. So my initial response is that I wouldn't be keen to consider that extra work, because whatever went back into that SIL fund would probably result in a budget cut somewhere else. For example, perhaps with community grants. You know, I mean, the two things, it gives us more flexibility with that money. So that would be my initial response, but I will have further discussions, given that it was only Monday, with Cabinet and take their views. There were 1 or 2 other questions raised at scrutiny. There was a question about multi-year government settlement. We do expect to get a longer multi-year settlement, but of course we've been saying that for years, and it seems more likely this year, but until it happens, we can't be sure. There was a question about whether funds from the original budget were transferred to reserves that were ring-fenced, and that's very variable depending on which funds are in surplus. Very often grant funds are for a specific purpose, and they will be transferred to reserves for that specific purpose. There was a query raised about the favourable variance in car parking receipts, and the question was whether it indicated the success of our car parking strategy, which I think it does. But we will review the baseline budget on car park income as part of the budget setting process. And there were similarly questions about the write-off of non-domestic rates and the comparison with other councils. Mrs. Keys at the time pointed out that we had a very high collection rate for non-domestic rates. These write-offs happen everywhere. if they're completely uncollectible, we have to accept that. I think that sums up the questions covered with scrutiny, but obviously clearly I'll be happy to answer further questions on this paper, and Mrs. Keys is here for the more detailed things that I won't be able to answer.
Thank you very much indeed. We have one councillor who who is registered to speak. Councillor Godfrey, would you like to come forward and make your comments?
The budget for the current year included unexpected additional funding from government as the resets and the changing the funding settlement was not did not come forward. This allowed for some very cautious reductions in expected income from car parking and property income and other things. So it's good to see normal services is being restored, with favourable outturns being reported in those items in this paper, making the cautious budget agreed back in February even less necessary. The various additional funding received late in the previous year are a major reason for the large increase in reserves. And the high positive carried forward amounts, but there's also considerable underspend in many areas of both the revenue and capital budget. Failing to deliver planned work may allow a significant increase to reserves, but I must question why this tax revenue is now being still held, when there will be no opportunity to spend much of it on its intended purpose in the current year, or frankly, anytime soon. There is increasing pressure on the limited number of our staff to deliver the normal workload without the additional burden of work being carried forward from the previous years. This increase in reserves also hides the lack of progress being made with the TC25 savings strategy, which reduced just £3,370 in the last quarter, according to a later report. The council tax collection rate has bounced back to its normal high level after the last year or so. Congratulations to our officers team for achieving this. Similarly, I welcome the level of expenditure of the whole of the Disabled Facilities Grant, as this helps residents, our NHS and social care partners, because effective use of the money is not so being so well managed in other district councils. It's great to see it being properly used here in Winchester. I'd be grateful if you could explain why special maintenance vehicles replacement is not a planned expenditure coming out of a revenue budget, Converting these vehicles from leasehold to purchase seems odd. But why is this a capital spend? And finally, on the business rates issue, the paper does not give much reassurance in the form of a detail of activity on attempts to collect outstanding business rates. Can you assure me that everything that could reasonably be done to prevent the need for debt write-off has been done to prevent loss to the public purse? And also on a related issue, has any substantive progress been made in clearing down the appeals backlog? Or is there still considerable uncertainty in the amount that might be owing, as seems to be indicated in this report? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Deputy Leader, do you have any comments on that? I don't know if Ms. Keys would like, if there's any technical points she wants to address.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I will just comment on one or two questions. I think Councillor Godfrey makes a good point that perhaps we didn't need to be quite as cautious with the budget, but at the time we deal with the information that we have available, and as things move forward, obviously, I'd far prefer to be in the position where we have a surplus to our needs than to have a deficit. I think this is particularly true given the next couple of years with local government reorganisation. It's imperative that we both continue to deliver the services and deliver the council plan over this next couple of years and have the resources for the transfer, which brings me to the transformation to the new start councils. And because this is also reflected in the fact that we will have to and are in the process of reconsidering the approach to TC25, given that the early wins, the 50% of our planned savings which we achieved, we always knew could be done relatively quickly, whereas some of the longer term projects now needs to be, particularly digitisation processes, need to be looked at in the context of LGR, and so that's the approach we are currently taking with reviewing in all service areas their approach both to the previously agreed targets for TC25, but also how we go forward with local government reorganisation. I can assure you that everything possible was done to recover those business rates. Companies that are dissolved and an administration, it's reached the point where there is no possibility of receiving any of those funds. In terms of the planned maintenance and the revenue capital element to it, I'll defer to Mrs. Keys.
Yeah, picking up the item on the vehicles, there has been previously we've leased those vehicles and we're now looking to purchase those outright. Either way, under the new accounting regulations, that would have been capital expenditure, even under the leasing model. That's changed recently. And the reason that we've taken the decision to purchase rather than lease them going forward is a financial one. With any lease, there is an interest rate implicit within that lease, and there is an additional cost to leasing.
Thank you very much indeed. Cabinet, any other questions on this paper? Yeah, so let's I'll just quickly pick up the points that are the resolutions coming out of the scrutiny committee. The first was that they noted the report, which is kind of them. The second was that the Cabinet Member for Finance Performance, the Deputy Leader, consider the allocation of interest earned. I think we've addressed that, but you will report back to that committee. The third was that the Cabinet Member for Place and Local Plan consider a member discussion with the aim of encouraging applications and schemes for future SIL funding. That seems like an eminently sensible thing. I think a good briefing to councillors on how they can work with their communities to encourage bids would be something that we would all welcome. I think most of the other points that are helpful but don't require discussion at this meeting. But I would like to thank the Scrutiny Committee for the care and thought that they put into their comments and the work that was done. Councillor Cutler, do you have any final thoughts?
Thank you, Leader. I don't really have much to add. I'd like to thank Councillor Godfrey for his support for our approach and the fact that we, are continue to be relatively stable with our accounts. I hope it was raised at a parish council meeting yesterday where a Hampshire County councillor present was talking about the cuts in government funding and had the table for the projected cuts that will come through for each council, and I was able to reassure the parish council that we had already taken this into account. And I think this is where we have differed to some other councils who have sort of an element of ignoring the inevitable, have left them in difficult positions. So as I said at the beginning of my comments, the finance team have done a superb job in producing the end of year accounts so quickly under the very tight deadline that's imposed by the auditors, and from that being able to produce this report. So I'd like to thank them for that.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Cutler. Yes, I mean, it is an absolute priority for this authority to be this administration to be very careful with its use of public money. People work hard, and the money they pay over needs to be towards the council, and the other money that comes in needs to be spent with care, and we need to maintain the council as a financially robust organisation. We don't want to go down the path that we've seen in other places where that stops being the case. And we do face major uncertainties with the government's new funding formula, unlikely to be helpful, and I'm really pleased that we've already reflected that in our thinking, as well as some of the complexities that local government reorganisation potentially puts forward, which means that some projects that would normally have made sense become harder to justify when we might find that we're being, for example, required to combine our IT systems with other authorities, and so actually just having introduced a new one would not be sensible in that kind of consideration. So we have a set of recommendations. The first is that we note the outturn of the general fund and the capital programme. The second is that
Leader, apologies to interrupt. Did you want to consider whether we needed to go into exempt session?
Yes, apologies. That is a very useful reminder, and I do appreciate that, because I do note that Councillor Godfrey had asked to speak on the details of the exempt appendix. Do you still feel the need to do that? Thank you, and you did so in a way which respected the confidential nature of what's in that paper. I mean, I think, Cabinet, we've all read that paper and we've had a chance. I think if we have any questions, we could ask them, but nobody did. And I don't think the details add anything material to what is in the public paper, other than naming the companies involved, which I don't think is particularly helpful for us to discuss, since none of them exist anymore. So does anybody want to go into exempt session to discuss that bit of the paper? No. Okay, so we're not going to go into exempt session. We'll keep going, and we won't get into the detail of that, but I know we have all read it. So thank you for that reminder. So having also considered the exempt appendix, we are noting the general fund revenue outturn, the capital programme outturn as set out in the report, and the exempt appendix, approving the transfers from the major and to and from the major investment reserve as set out in Appendix 1, and noting the reserves and closing balances, approving the revised 25-26 capital programme as set out in Appendix 5, including the special maintenance vehicle replacements, the Rural Enterprise Prosperity Fund and the Disabled Facilities Grant, noting the revised 25-35 capital programme as set out in Appendix 6, and approving the proposal to write off the 5 individual outstanding non-domestic rate debts. Cabinet, are you happy to agree those recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. The next paper is the housing revenue account outturn. Councillor Reach, are you going to lead on that one? Please fire away, and That's Councillor Godfrey is going. Thank you very much indeed for your input on the meeting. Councillor Reach.
Thank you. So the paper before you at agenda item 11 is the housing revenue account outturn for the last financial year and a reforecast for the capital budget for the next financial year. Many of the comments which you made regarding the general fund can also apply to this, but to a high degree, this is funded out of people's rents and out of and other things from tenants and leaseholders. So it's incredibly important that we manage this effectively and carefully. And I think this demonstrates that we've done so. The main things to call out in this report, which are all detailed in the 7 appendices, are the movements, which you'll find on page 156 following. But the headlines are that the housing revenue account returned a surplus in the last financial year of £1.9 million against a budget of a deficit of £1.7 million. I can give the reasons for that shortly. And linked to that, the capital outturn was £13.2 million expenditure against a budget of £26.3 million, which was revised in February to £23 million. The main reasons for this are detailed in the paper, but I'll pull some of the highlights out. They include lower than expected employee costs of just over £500,000, and similarly lower than expected premises costs of just over £500,000, and some favourable costs on an IT procurement of around £1 million, and then some more technical savings relating to depreciation and some interest receivable because of the way the capital was deferred. The main reasons for these, as set out in the paper, relate to team reorganisation. This involves individuals and HR issues, so we'll treat that sensitively, but that was done earlier in the year. That in turn led to some delays in some of the projects that we were seeking to deliver. And of course, in January of this year, so in the previous financial year, we self-referred to the social housing regulator to work with them to improve our compliance activities. That meant a change of focus and a change of direction during the year to ensure that we bring our housing stock up to a good standard in the eyes of the social housing regulator and also in the eyes of tenants. This has meant that some of the projects which we were expecting to do will now be done in this financial year, which explains why there's been some movement in the capital expenditure as well. Further to that, we've been trying to pin the tail on the donkey through the year with respect to some macroeconomic factors such as interest rates and inflation. You'll see in the paper that inflation was more benign in some areas than expected, particularly relating to energy costs for communal buildings where we're responsible for that, but that the interest rates, particularly that charged by the Public Works Loan Board, was higher than the 5% we budgeted for at 5.25 or 5.4, something like that. So there's some macroeconomic factors that have pulled us in different directions, and of course they also feed through to materials costs and labour costs, which have pulled us slightly away from our original budget. I could go into even more detail, but it's all in the paper, and hopefully that is sufficient to prompt any questions that members or visiting councillors might have.
Great, thank you very much indeed. We do have a councillor who wishes to speak on this. So, Councillor Horrell, would you like to come forward with your comments?
Chair, thank you for allowing me to address Cabinet again. And firstly, may I say thank you to Councillor Westwood and Councillor Reach for their support and cooperation, working across political lines to do the best for the HRA and the leaseholders, tenants, for the good across the district, and also to the officers and the housing team who always do their very best to try and address issues, sometimes in difficult circumstances. Chair, clearly the Outturn report is reflecting the history of what has happened, but I'm addressing my comments this morning about how that understanding and a general movement of staff. And I know in certain areas we've experienced delays because we haven't had posts filled. So my question is, how can we get the stabilisation of the housing team and a full complement working effectively to deliver in this one of the most important areas of work that this council has, and indeed we'll want it to be in great shape when we move to a new local government structure. Secondly, a theme that you'll have heard me raise before, the new homes approach has, in my view, been diminished. We've had less success, and despite the commitment to buy houses at Kings Barton, that has been delayed. So we see a general downturn. And my question is, what are we going to do to get back on track? Because we know that housing in our district is still very much required. Quality, affordable housing is required, and most residents look to us as a fantastic provider of that versus some of the other registered providers. And I see in a couple of places that the Outturn report indicates compliance costs, perhaps fire safety work, an important one of the social housing regulators' assessment of us. But where have the most significant impacts been on the budget regarding that piece of work and the efforts that we must continue to make? And I see there's much effort being made to ensure that we meet all the relevant standards. IT was very much a focus for us in terms of our systems, which are not as joined up as they might be and slightly out of date. We obviously have a changing future with LGR and the like, but what are we doing about IT and ensuring that we have a robust system to try and deliver against the needs of our tenants, where the systems historically have rather let us down? Finally, Chair, I'd like to say that there is clearly a huge amount of work and moving parts in this report, and I appreciate the various favourable or unfavourable variances. In this instance, a very positive outturn. However, it does feel as if that we need to focus on getting back on track for delivery, because all that the sort of movement from this financial year, sorry, the last financial year to the new one, is that it just clogs up the system. What we promised to do next time will be delayed, etc. So the pipeline is harder to manage, and some of those things that we desperately need maybe are not coming to fruition as quickly. So, Chair, I hope that those comments are helpful in the scheme of things, but you can count on my continued interest and support for this hugely critical part of the Council's work, which I know that we should be rightly proud. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Reach.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Horrell, for those comments. We discussed a number of these items at scrutiny on Monday night, so the scrutiny minutes, which should be out very shortly, will detail some of the answers to them. I'm happy to go over a few of them again. On staffing, on vacancies, the team is now in a much more stable place. We've got key vacancies filled. I'll pass to Mr. Hendy shortly to ask about that. We've got new structure in place as well, so that hopefully is an issue that has passed. On the new homes, I know we have some good, robust discussions about our approach to new homes, and the consultation on the new home strategy closed on the 5th of September. So hopefully you fed your comments in, and I know tenants and others will have fed comments into that as well, and we'll continue to discuss that. On Kings Barton, referring to the paper in particular, we note that there was a favourable capital expenditure, slightly odd way of looking at it, in the last financial year. That has now moved on. So this year we've now made some progress. So the contracts have exchanged. So we're a little bit later than we expected, but it's fallen the other side of the financial year. On compliance costs, I'll ask Mr. Hendy on those, if that's all right. I brought a paper to Cabinet, I think it was the previous Cabinet or perhaps the one before that, on the IT procurement, which changed our approach for both maintenance, repairs and compliance activity. Bearing in mind what we think we know about local government reorganisation, to make some passive provision to that, to ensure that we can bring forward the benefits of that new contract sooner, while also, as I say, making passive provision for whatever may come from local government reorganisation. So hopefully, again, we've been able to protect those benefits that that contract was expected to bring. And then your final point was around expenditure. I'll pass over to Mr. Hendy on that, if you're happy with that. So I think 3 points were around staffing, the compliance costs where they impacted the budget, and then finally on ensuring the expenditure actually happens in line with what I'm recommending today.
Mr. Hendy, do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. Just taking those, if I could add to some of Councillor Reach's response to those questions. In relation to staff vacancies, the report makes the case that actually 300,000 of the £500,000 staff vacancies was planned because that was part of the budget setting from the previous year. We are hopeful that we will have a stable staff complement by the middle of next month. We have offers out that people have accepted and people should be taking up positions. It has been particularly difficult for us to attract people into technical positions, property services positions, because as this council has experienced in relation to compliance work, all housing organisations are chasing a limited number of people, and therefore it's been quite challenging to attract people into those positions. New homes, just to give Cabinet some good news. Last week we entered into contract with Carla Homes for the 146 properties at Kings Barton. So although there's slippage from the previous year, we are now actually in contract with them on that. In relation to the key areas around compliance costs, obviously one of the key ones is stock condition. We have started the stock condition survey. There are 80 stock condition surveys already undertaken as a pilot before we launch with the contractor to go into that in full scale. We're also asking them to provide floor plans of all our properties as well, which we didn't have in place as well. And there's a significant amount of investment around that, which will give us that base information we need to manage the stock. The other major areas are fire risk assessments and remedial works, which, if you remember, we made significant provision for that work in the last budget, but slipped some of that work into the current year, and I'm glad to be able to advise Cabinet that we are making good progress on that, and the social housing regulator is pleased with the progress we're making. In relation to IT, two areas in which we needed to revise our IT. We didn't have an IT system that provided us the means to manage the compliance activity, so we've entered into a contract with a specific IT supplier around compliance, and that is aiming to go live in the middle of October. We're doing the work on that. Our asset management system is out of date and won't be supported by the middle of next year, so we've started the work on replacing that asset management system, whether we go with the existing module provided by our existing supplier MRI or whether we go to the market. We're confident we'll be able to achieve that in time. I think that deals with the questions, although the last one was around expenditure, which I didn't catch.
I think it was ensuring that what we planning to do next year. I think Councillor Horrell's question was around ensuring that what we were planning to do next year and seeking approval for today in terms of revised capital budget, we actually do deliver.
So questions in relation to current year's programme, yes, as I said, we're already on track in terms of the delivery of the new homes on Kings Barton. The other areas that slipped were sewage treatment works. We are keen to progress that work. Unfortunately, it's not totally within our gift. We are in the hands of the Environment Agency to agreeing those schemes, so we'll progress them as soon as we can and get agreement around those. The other area which slipped significantly, and Councillor Horrell will be aware of this, was work on Swedish cottages. We've resolved the situation with the original contractor there, who was unable to complete the work to the Swedish cottages on the prices they tendered for in the first place, so that contract's been ended. We've entered into a new contract with the supplier to make sure all those homes are wind and watertight before the winter happens, and we'll be revising the approach to undertaking work to those Swedish cottages in the current year.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other questions from Cabinet colleagues? Or any questions? Councillor Porter.
Thank you. I think it's probably to Mr. Hendy actually. Bearing in mind how long it takes to get an EA response, an environmental agency response to the water treatment works, do we have an adequate funnel of work that we've submitted to them to ensure that we don't have undue delays in this programme?
I'm not sure I can answer that. I don't think we have submitted all the possible schemes that we could take forward to the EA. No, I think because there's just a limit in the amount of resources that we've got. Again, it's a relatively technical area of work in terms of we have one officer within the council that's leading on that. We have been successful in going out and getting a consultant to help and supplement that resource. So I don't think we've taken all the, because there's over nearly 15 different plants that we would take to the EA. So no, we haven't done that in one go. We're scheduling that so in the light of the resources we've got to be able to manage that work.
Councillor Porter, you look like you had a follow-up.
I do. I just say, is there anything we can do? I'm going to ask the cabinet member actually if you'd like to consider that as a potential way of speeding up that work, because I think it's something we all know we wanted to do, and it ties up really with the action plan that we've just been talking about earlier in the nature action plan.
I'd gladly meet with you. I think it's something we definitely should explore, and certainly our Member of Parliament's been very passionate and vocal about the subject, and his weight can only help direct the Environment Agency towards where they should be looking. So perhaps it's worth the conversation with our Member of Parliament as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other questions or comments? Any debate? We have, I don't know if you've had a chance to read through the scrutiny comments in detail. I think we've covered most of them. Is there anything that we have new information on since the meeting that needs addressing? There was no particular recommendation, but there were just comments.
Yes, it was only on Monday night, so yes, there's a couple of things. One, around EPC-C, there was a question from scrutiny of are we being optimistic in our delivery? Of course, as that programme continues, as we head towards 2030, the low-hanging fruit are being dealt with, so it becomes progressively more difficult. But the 672 houses that will be part of the retrofit programme, that will help, and we expect to increase the figure from around 70% by about 14 percentage points, which is detailed in the report at the back of this agenda, of properties meeting EPC-C or equivalent. And Mr. Hendy, I think, has some updates on one of the other points as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Point number 6 around local authority housing fund, there was a question about whether we had been successful, and at the meeting I committed to check that. Initially we weren't successful in round 3 for LAF, but we made a subsequent bid and we were successful in receiving £900,000 worth of funding to acquire 4 properties. 3 of those are temporary accommodation. One is a scheme under the Afghan Relocation Assistance Policy Scheme, a 4-bedroom property, and we have offers out at the moment on 2 of the 3 temporary accommodation properties. The last property, we are working with South East Migration Partnership to identify the Afghan family who may require a property that's significantly adapted to deal with disabilities, and we can apply for additional funding to MHCLG to undertake that work, and that's what we're negotiating with at the moment.
And finally, on point 7 from the scrutiny minutes, I think Mr. Hendy addressed that in the meeting regarding the procurement of the Swedish Cottages retrofit programme.
Yes, I think the other points have been addressed. So, Cabinet, any debate on this paper? It is a report, so I'm not entirely sure. You know, I think it's one to question rather than to debate, because it is what it is. The recommendations we have are to do lots of noting, to note the HRA outturn figures, to note the capital programme for major works and new build, to note the funding for the HRA capital programme as detailed in paragraphs 10.7 to 10.10, and to approve the reforecast capital programme for 25-26. Cabinet, are those agreed?
Agreed.
Good, thank you very much indeed. On to Q1 finance and performance monitoring. Deputy Leader, would you like to introduce the paper?
Thank you, Leader. This is the first performance report of the 25-26 financial year and focuses on the progresses and achievements against the priorities of the new council plan, which was adopted at the beginning of the year and came into effect on the 1st of April. So therefore, this report covers the performance and financial information relating to the period 1st of April to the 30th of June. There's been one minor enhancement to the information provided in the report, and this is to include historical trends in the RAG status of projects in performance reports to provide better context on progress over time. The report continues to be presented in the streamlined format that clearly and concisely sets out the relevant information showing the progress this council is making to achieve the priorities of the council plan. Some of the highlights of the report include that the council has been named the best council nationally for tackling climate change. We put the building blocks in place, working closely with BIFA to commence the rollout of food collection of food waste next month. We've started building the brand new sports pavilion at River Park. We've delivered a programme of green business support and achieved gold accreditation from the Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance, which are all substantial achievements within that quarter. Scrutiny Committee considered the report at some length on Monday evening, and there were a series of recommendations which I can address now if you're happy for me to, Leader.
Please do.
The first was that the fly tipping performance be reviewed. I think it was unfortunate that we slipped beneath the collection target of 80% within the contractual time. That dropped to 77%. I will work with Councillor Cromoyson to work out the reasons for that. But it's worth pointing out that actually the number of fly tipping incidents has now dropped to 100 in the quarter, which is the lowest we've been for a long time. And I think it's a good opportunity at the moment to point out that there was a prosecution, successful prosecution last Friday of a householder who had paid someone £200 to take his waste away. It's in my ward, and I was really pleased to hear that this has happened. It cost that householder £4,000 and a criminal record to have that, and I think that's a good message that we need to get out, and is clearly having our approach of prosecuting rather than issuing fixed penalty notices is clearly showing a good result. The Scrutiny Committee also asked that there was an update on the trends from the annual staff travel service be provided to all members, and that information regarding the staff heat scheme be provided to all members. And I think the Chief Executive undertook to provide that via the DSU. We've already raised the programme of works to achieve energy performance EPC-C for council homes. That was discussed at both papers, and in the previous paper we discussed that. And the final resolution was that Cabinet considers the development of an integrated key performance indicator relating to climate change and the allocation of additional resources to accelerate the delivery of council plan priorities. That is something I will discuss with Cabinet colleagues and will report back to Scrutiny at the next meeting. So I'm happy to take questions on the report, and obviously the report covers the areas of all Cabinet members, so other Cabinet members may be able to respond as well.
Thank you very much indeed. And I have two councillors who wish to speak on this, Councillor Lee and Councillor Horrell. Councillor Lee, would you like to come forward?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'll try and avoid repetition of what was said at scrutiny and what's captured in the minutes, which I've only just seen. Just to highlight, I think the capture of the minutes for scrutiny talks about highlighting perceived gaps in the council performance reporting. I think it's actually actual gaps. We talked about previous cabinet committee meetings and scrutiny, need for an enforcement KPI and others, which I think was recognised. So I think it's actual. It's a question of whether those will be delivered. And Deputy Leader has mentioned how the integrated key performance indicator suggestion will be taken forward, which is good to hear. I just wanted to pick up on a few things because Councillor Lerny was not at scrutiny, and I wanted to go to page 80 about the CNAP measurement. And we talked about at scrutiny the positive variances and how possibly they could be used to avoid a logjam or what I would call a domino effect of reduced outcomes or reporting. And I think the CNAP measure is rightly picking up on the need to identify robust methods to attribute carbon savings to specific actions and projects. I appreciate this is a difficult undertaking and may require further thinking and resource. So I think to get smarter with respect to that attribution, because we obviously are very proud of our achievements, I think it's worthy of consideration. And the other one I mentioned, page 79, was the small-scale solar on our council assets. And again, accelerating or expanding the outline business case would be great if the positive variances could perhaps be applied to that and be considered. Particularly also adding community energy shared ownership opportunities. Residents could have a real stake, and they could then access cheaper power when surplus to council use or other uses. It could also leverage additional funding, and I wonder whether Councillor Lenny would be able to comment on that. And finally, not quite finally, but I did comment on major regeneration and some of the challenges Bahrain Depot was talked about, and I've said it before, and I just wonder whether making regeneration more attractive and improving marketability and de-risking for developers might mean some kind of joined up regeneration process with an overarching master plan or whatever you want to call it. And I didn't receive comment on that. Hopefully Cabinet might want to comment on that as well. So generally, I think in terms of staffing and vacancies, etc., contractor problems, I do wonder whether some of the positive variances could be used to make the opportunities more attractive to get these gaps and issues sorted out. So those are my thoughts and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Horrell, would you like to come forward?
Chair, thank you. I was unable to be at scrutiny on Monday because I was with the parish council, but had I been there, there were 5 or 6 questions I would have asked. On 183 nutrient mitigation solution, we've touched on this a little bit in a previous comment today, but actually understanding really how we're heading on this and whether we do have constraints upon us because of others involved in this conversation. I know it's showing green, but this still is an important area for all of us to understand the detail of the progress that we're making. It may have already come up at scrutiny, but page 192, I just fear that the Bar End Depot is going the way of other regeneration projects, which is on the back burner. We've made so little progress on many of the other projects, and to see this one back in negotiations with the preferred bidder, given the timescales that we now will have to be working to in the context of LGR, I hope that we have the right resources and the right focus on some of these important aspects. On page 196, one of my perhaps continuing comments, Chair, is about the Winchester Movement Strategy. And correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the fundamentals in that project was the introduction of a park and ride to free the city of some of the traffic. And we still don't have that on the horizon here. And I question whether we have given sufficient focus to actually delivering against that. I understand your desire to link that with other projects, but we're not pulling that out here to assure people that one of the priorities for that project is in hand and where we're all heading. I'm going to say it again, I'm afraid, Councillor Reach, but new homes continue to worry me. I look forward to the rural strategy later in the year. I'm delighted to hear that the deal has been done for Kings Barton, but we await, Woodman Close has been on the stocks ever since I've been a councillor, and I just hope that we really can deliver those in the short term. It would be great for our credibility to tell everyone that new homes are still our priority. So a set of ambers there don't fill me with joy, and I'm sure it doesn't officers of the council either. In the housing revenue account capital spend, I have sort of two or three key questions. The buyback of former council houses, which we had committed to a great strategy to buy back units, and money was set aside, a budget for that, but it seems like slow progress. And just, is that a function of the market, or are we able to do more there? EPCC, which you again just mentioned, Councillor Reach, that again I think is one of those key targets that we have to really understand the reality of getting there, and whether we have to take other actions, particularly on those units that are very lowly rated. And I hear the assurance about staffing, but again, in the first quarter here on major repairs, we're saying staff vacancy is actually delaying some of that work. So whether we've solved it or not, what you're saying in the report is that some commencement of programmes are being impacted by that. So as previously said, tenants give us their money, they give us their rent. We commit to delivering outstanding, decent homes and communities. And I just hope that we have the right focus here to get those works done, and that because of perhaps of some of the other delays and some of those shortages of personnel, we're now not in a position, we're chasing our tail already in Q1. And if there's anything we can all do to support the progress of that, I'd be very happy to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Cutler.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Lee talked about perceived gaps in KPIs. I've already mentioned that we will have a discussion on integrated climate change KPI. The planning enforcement work needs to wait until the scrutiny committee has its task and finish group has reported on planning enforcement. I'd suggest that the question on CNAP, perhaps Councillor Lerner could respond to, and similarly the regen question, Leader may wish to comment on. In terms of Councillor Horrell's comments, virtually everything that you've raised has been either discussed at this meeting or was discussed at scrutiny. And again, I think there are areas that the specialist members of Cabinet can respond to. So nutrient mitigation, in fact, I think we've already discussed our end. I think the Leader will would be keen to respond, as I'm sure he will, on the movement strategy. And I think we've already been through the new homes element and the capital spend EPPC, but Councillor Reach may want to add to that. So I don't know which order you want members to, or cabinet members to take the questions, but probably Councillor Lennies first.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Yes, Councillor Lee is right around the CNAP measures. It would be really useful to have better measures about the impact of the actions we're carrying out, but it is technically difficult and it would still be based on modelling. I would be concerned that we'd be using resource which could actually be achieving carbon reduction on measuring carbon reduction. Particularly given the limited time we have left as an authority, I think I would like to use the resource we have to embed actions firmly in place. The solar on council assets, yes, we are moving forward with that. These do, however, need quite detailed business cases, and it's important that we're confident in that before moving forward. We'd definitely be interested in talking to anybody who has a viable community energy project and the land on which to do it. Again, there may be some constraints given the amount of time we have left as an authority and the point at which we're no longer able to enter into contracts. So sooner rather than later, if anybody does have anything that's viable. On the park and ride, we ourselves do not have the land to provide a park and ride facility. The park and ride at on Kings Barton is reliant on having the Spine Road open, and that obviously has been delayed. We continue to negotiate on the park and ride at Sir John Moore Barracks, but again, that is reliable on the timescale of development.
Thank you very much. On Bar End, Mr. Hendy, are we getting the paper that updates the decision on in October or November?
Thank you, Leader. I'm not sure in terms of it's on the forward plan for October yet, but as you're aware, the preferred bidder out of the first round of marketing that site has withdrawn. We're in negotiations with the other bidders to confirm a price, and we're hoping that that will be either this week or next week they'll confirm a price. And as soon as that's the case, we'll be able to report back to Cabinet as soon as possible.
That's great. I think if we could do it on the fastest possible timing so that we can move ahead with that, that would be much appreciated by all concerned. Unfortunately, we aren't, this isn't China, so we aren't actually in charge of how private companies decide to run their business. And occasionally we do get caught in changes of strategy or financial pressures on partners of this kind. Any other points? On the point of an overall score in terms of progress on carbon, would it be possible to maybe publish the climate action scorecard figure as one of our KPIs?
Since it'll be another 2 years before they report.
Oh, just put in the current one.
I would actually be reluctant about that because it's not actually a measure of carbon reduction. I mean, it does give us obviously an idea about how we're matching our actions with other council, but not necessarily an overall figure. So it is something that we can consider. I would also say that there are a number of items in that action scorecard which we can't achieve because of our situation as a district, and there are some others connected to, for example, some of the planning where we're just not going to do it.
There was a point raised about whether taking a year and a half or 2 years to do an overarching master plan for the city would speed things up. I think the fact that it would take a year and a half or 2 years to do it kind of answers the question. So by the time we'd done it, we would no longer exist. And so any projects that were waiting for the outcome of that work, I think by definition would have been rather severely slowed down. Are there any, there was a point about staffing. Chief Executive, do you want to address that?
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for the opportunity. Members, you've often said, and thank you today for the appreciation you've given to our staff who work tirelessly day after day, working with communities, residents, businesses, stakeholders, problem solving, finding new innovative solutions, delivering our statutory powers, and frankly, making the difference to our district, working alongside you and your political leadership. And we find ourselves in a difficult position at the moment with local government change, and we are working so hard to ensure that our staff are supported. And I thought it just might be helpful for you just to have the highlights of our recent staff survey, because comments have been made around our turnover, which has actually reduced since last year. And I think that would be supported by the scores that I have here of the survey, which is a full staff survey, which is that over 84% of our colleagues enjoy working for the council. 93% believe their teams are supportive and friendly. 86% speak positively about their manager and how they're supported. 80% say strong engagement. These are amazing scores. And really importantly, which I am so proud of, 92% of staff understand the key objectives of their services. Our staff know what they are doing. They are fully trained. We offer a full learning and development programme online, in person. If a colleague leaves us, we ask why. Some people make choices. We have all made choices around our future. But we are in a notoriously competitive environment for the public sector at the moment, and our mission is to ensure that our staff are best placed to make that move into a new council if that is what they wish to do when the time comes in a couple of years. And that is our unrelenting focus, in addition to delivering great services for our residents until that time when we will serve a bigger geography. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Chief Executive, and do pass on my thanks to your team for those really very positive results in terms of managing your team. It's greatly appreciated, and particularly actually all the line managers who've been contributors to that. I think it's important that they get thanked.
Just a few HRA questions.
Some HRA questions, Councillor Rich.
Yes, Councillor Horrell asked a few additional questions about the HRA. One about the rural strategy, which I know she's a passionate advocate for. The paper we brought to Cabinet Committee Housing on the 23rd of July of this year makes clear that there will be a rural strategy within the new homes, overall new home strategy. And we continue to meet and discuss this and how important it is. Linked to that, the Woodman Close project, I'm also frustrated how slow this has been. There's reasons for that, but we needn't go over it. I think we're bringing full business case the 14th of October to Cabinet, so that's not that far off. It's about a month's time. We should have a full business case, provided that final business case, provided that all works out. And then we've talked about EPCC. On the buyback of council houses, Mr. Hendy.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Rich. The problem we have in terms of buyback of council properties is it's making the scheme actually be viable in a business case in terms of the rents that we can charge, the acquisition cost, but also the work we need to undertake to the property once we bought it back. So it's often quite difficult to combine those two things within the available financing. So there's a viable business case. We are constantly looking for properties, and that's the issue where we haven't made progress today, because to date we've been finding properties which require a level of works, which means it falls out of the sort of business case, the viability that can be sustained from the rents that can be charged.
And then just finally, also on the rural strategy, I think we've got a trip out into the district very soon to look at our homes that we have out in the wider district. I'm really looking forward to that. And yesterday I was hearing about the new homes being built right in the southeast corner of the district. I went on to visit Southwark, Whitley, Hambledon and Denmead parishes afterwards as well, to make sure that I'm aware of what's going on down there in Councillor Cutler's corner of the district.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Crimoyson.
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on a point that Councillor Cutler raised in the introduction in relation to the Q1 numbers for fly tipping. And I think you highlighted that we were a little lower than our target on the clear up rates. When I look back over the previous quarters, you can see that there's an oscillation either side of the target rate. So the 77% is a fraction under 80%, which is the target. Previously, we've had a quarter where it was 73%. So yes, it's amber. It's something we'll keep an eye on. I will look into if there's any systemic reasons for that. But I would like to point out that our actual objective is to reduce the amount of fly tipping that we have in our district. Not only that, that if we have any clear ups to do, that we reduce the amount of time, the number of instances that are beyond the clear up rate. So the actual number of fly tips was 102, which is about 40% lower than any of the previous quarters, on average over the previous year. And if you do the maths on that, you actually find that the number that were outstanding after the contract days is actually significantly lower than it has been on any previous quarters that are in the report. So ironically, although we've got an amber and it's slightly lower, we've actually got far fewer fly tips that are not being cleared up in time. So I think ultimately this is where stats can sometimes give a misleading impression of what's actually going on. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. And I think the ongoing crackdown and criminal prosecution of people who fly tip in our district, and people increasingly knowing that if they fly tip here, we will come after them hard, is having an effect, which was the intention of the policy. Are there any questions from Cabinet? I hope not, since it's about your own area. So if you don't know what's going on there, then I hope yes, I think is there any debate? Things that people would like to. Any final comments, Councillor Cutler?
I think my comment is that this, we've had a year of this shorter report, and it does seem to stimulate debate because it is shorter to a certain extent and more focused, and I think every time now we seem to have a sensible debate about the important aspects of things because we have such a clear report. So I'd like to thank Simon Howson for his ongoing work on that, because I think it's a very clear paper for anybody to see what the progress we're making against the council plan. So it's a very important report.
Thank you very much indeed. So yes, indeed. So building on a strong and clear plan that sets out clear priorities for the council's work, we have a clear report that is leading to good discussion and debate and review of how we're performing against that plan, and overall with of course a few things that need further attention. I think a very good start to the year. So I would like the Chief Executive to pass on to officers our thanks for all of the work that led to these outcomes, obviously to Simon Howson for pulling the work together, but he wouldn't have anything to pull together if it wasn't for all the hard work by our officer colleagues in terms of making this happen. So please pass on our thanks for all their work. Cabinet, we're not asked to do very much with this report other than find it useful, which we have done, and to note the progress achieved in endorsing the contents of the report. Are you happy to do so?
Great.
Thank you very much indeed. The last item is to note the forward plan, which highlights the decisions that are coming up at Cabinet and Council. There's also a special council, obviously, and a special cabinet that relates to local government reorganisation. Does that go on the forward plan, or is that?
Thank you, Leader. That was on the, this is October onwards forward plan that's included. That one, that was included in the September forward plan.
Right. That sounds like we're clear. I think everybody kind of knows it's coming, don't they, really? There's no super secret plan on local government reorganisation. And we've talked about the fact that we may have a decision on Bar End in October. Do we need to add that, or can we do that later?
Leader.
Oh, it's under the general property one.
Yes, it will be.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay, so Cabinet, following that discussion, are we all happy to note that? Oh, Councillor Porter.
Ask a question, please. A disabled facilities grant policy review comes forward in November. How is that going to be investigated or revised, please?
Mr. Handy.
Yes, we've already taken the outline draft policy through Economy and Housing Policy Committee and agreed with them the framework within which we've undertaken research over the last year, looking at changes to the means testing element. So that work has been concluded, and that's the framework within which that we'll be bringing to Cabinet to consider a change in the policy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So Cabinet, we're asked to note that paper. Right, so thank you very much indeed. And I think we have now reached the end of our agenda. Good. So thank you, everybody. Please thank officers for all the work that was done to bring the papers together. Thank you, Cabinet members, for all the work you've done introducing them and answering questions as we've gone through. Thank you to the public and the visiting councillors for the questions that you've raised. I declare the meeting closed.